Hi everyone, my name is Catherine. I'm doing my master's in clinical psychology and I'm acting as a specialist in this course. This is Samuel and Leo. They're both in ECE and they're acting as the programmers. Together we are ExpoSocial, the exposure homework buddy. Social anxiety disorder is about the fear of being judged or negatively evaluated in social or performance situations. Treatment generally includes exposure therapy, which involves gradually exposing the individual to their feared stimulus until the fear is no longer anxiety-provoking. Unfortunately, homework compliance in this population is pretty low because why would you want to repeatedly be facing your fears over and over again? So we thought we would develop an app to help facilitate this exposure homework process in people with social anxiety disorder. So for the demo, I'm going to be acting as the therapist as well as the narrator, and both Samuel and Leo have social anxiety, except Leo has been using the app for several weeks. So Samuel, in order to reduce your social anxiety, I need you to be engaging in social exposures throughout the week in between our sessions. If you could do 5 this week before our next appointment, that would be great. Good luck. I'll see you next week.
Cool. Hey Leo. Hi. So my therapist has told me to do 5 exposures this week. Not only I don't have time for this, but even if I do, I don't know how to do them and I really get nervous. What should I do?
Yeah, so no, I can feel your pain. Actually, I had the same problem before until I found this app, ExpoSocial.
Oh, what is ExpoSocial?
Well, ExpoSocial is basically an exposure homework buddy app which can help you to manage your exposure homework effectively.
Oh, that sounds cool. So how does it work?
Well, let me show you how it works. So after I open this app, we firstly need to answer several questions regarding our fears, just like we do in the clinic.
So users are first asked to complete a series of questions that are based on a validated self-report measure of social anxiety severity. We've included 5 questions, but normally the scale is 24 items. This helps generate an exposure ladder or a fear hierarchy with items with the lowest ranking fear at the bottom and the highest ranking fear at the top of the ladder.
Okay, let's begin with my list of ranking fear, which is eating in public places. Yep. And we will firstly learn a bit what is exposure therapy. And then we will learn a bit about the exposure we are going to take.
So for this exposure, Leo is required to eat in a public place with somebody else. ExpoSocial has location compliance features to make sure that the exposure is actually taking place in public, as well as speech detection software to make sure that the exposure is in fact social.
Right. So let's start the exposure now. So we are gonna select a location for the exposure to take place.
Oh, okay. So I can select any location I want, like a favorite restaurant of mine?
Yeah, you can select any location you want. But for now, let's just start with the location where we are.
Okay.
So let's select our current location.
Before they can engage in the exposure, ExpoSocial asks the user to rate how fearful they think they're going to be in this exposure, or otherwise predict how anxious they're going to be, and this is used with subjective units of distress measure.
Okay, so Mo, what's your SATS level right now?
So remind me, Leo, what is SATS?
Well, it's quite simple. It's just how anxious you are.
Oh, so eating in public, I'm really anxious. So I'll rate 70 out of 100.
Okay, let's select 70 and get started.
So once he's updated his SEDS, the 30-minute timer starts and the exposure begins. The location compliance feature brings them to the exact location on the map.
Okay, so how do I use this app now? Do I need to update my SATS level in the app?
Yeah, we do. We just need to update our SATS level during our exposure, that just like we do in the clinic settings. And also, you know what? There's also another very cool feature that can remind you to update your SATS, and even they can detect if there's no speech during the exposure, they will notify you.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So
yeah,
how do we end the exposure then?
Well, it's quite same with our in clinic. The exposure will end when the SATS level reduces down to half of our original level, or we stay in the exposure for 30 minutes.
Okay.
So let's select our SAS level to 20 and see what's gonna happen.
So now the users have completed their exposure and they're going to be asked to complete some questions based on the experience they just had to help reinforce the learning.
Oh, so I recognize these questions.
Yeah, we did that questions several times in the clinic. So just submit the answers and
So users are required to repeat the same exposure multiple times until until their SUDS reduces over time. And this helps them gain a sense of mastery and accomplishment as they are moving through their exposure ladder or fear hierarchy.
yeah, you can see that I have already finished my 5th exposure for this week, so I can do for the next level.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so let's check out the profile page, and in the profile page, there's a button. After you click that, you can just send everything in the profile page to your therapist, which is pretty cool.
So the first metric that's displayed on the profile page is their social anxiety severity score, and next is a graphic depiction of their exposures over time. So the first red line represents Leo's first exposure, and that was when his anxiety was the most severe. And you can see that because it also took the longest for his SUDS ratings to come down. With every subsequent exposure, represented by a different colored line, the fear is gradually reducing, or the anxiety is gradually reducing. Next, you have all of the locations for which each of the exposures took place, and then a graphic depiction of the percentage of speech detected during each exposure. This should correlate with how anxious he was during the exposures and is indirectly a measurement of quality of the social exposure. Finally, you can see any rescheduled exposures for that week.
Yeah, if we go back to the exposure ladder page, we can see that my second level fear in the exposure ladder is right now available for me to do the next week's homework.
That's great, Leo. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just talk about the software architecture here. As you can see, the first flow blocks describe what the app is doing before the exposure starts and once the exposure ends. But really the core functionality lies during the exposure. So two things we are tracking right now, the location and whether there is a speech or not. So location is being tracked using the Google Places API, while to determine whether there's speech or not, we are using the speech recognizer API. So also during detection of speech, we are doing two things, making sure that there's a conversation happening and also determining the percentage of time they are speaking during the exposure.
So in terms of future work, we want to make all of the other exposures on the hierarchy functional, and then add all 24 items from the social anxiety questionnaire to round out our social anxiety app. We want to then add different iterations of the app to make it usable for different mental disorders where exposure therapy is also a validated treatment intervention. We might consider doing sentiment analysis for further research, as well as creating a social networking feature for ExpoSocial users to connect with each other and support each other. Finally, we need some sort of Firebase or cloud storage for longitudinal research. In terms of lessons learned, big pictures don't always translate into practice, and so we learned the importance of communication and being really clear with our ideas right from the get-go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.